While I was in surgery, my son sold my farm to pay for his honeymoon with my daughter-in-law. When I came back, he joked, "Thanks to your farm, my wife will get to know the Bahamas." I laughed and asked, "What's so funny?" The words my son Matthew spoke that day hit me harder than any physical blow, harder even than the surgery that had just almost taken my life. "Thanks to your farm, my wife is in the Bahamas." He delivered it like a joke, a casual remark, but to me, standing there on the threshold of my own home after 3 weeks fighting for my life, it was a declaration of war. I watched him, this firstborn son of mine, with a mocking smile playing on his lips, as he explained how he'd sold one of my properties. Not just a property, but my property, my sweat, my sacrifice, to fund Sophia's luxurious honeymoon. Sophia, my daughter-in-law, that woman who had never lifted a finger in her life, was now luxuriating on paradise beaches with money stolen from my very blood and bone. And then, something unexpected happened. I laughed. A deep, guttural laugh that ripped from the bottom of my chest, full of bitterness, yes, but also a chilling sort of amusement. Matthew looked at me confused, his arrogant smile flickering. "Dad, what's so funny?" he asked, his voice already wavering. I kept laughing as I slowly, deliberately, took off my travel jacket. 40 years I had built this farming empire. 40 years waking before dawn, supervising every single detail, sacrificing vacations, personal comforts, all to secure a future for my children. And this was my welcome home. This betrayal. "Oh, Matthew," I finally managed to say, the laughter still shaking me. "If only you knew what you just did." His face drained of color. The arrogance evaporated like morning dew under a brutal sun. "What? What do you mean?" he stammered. I walked slowly towards him, watching his hands begin to tremble. In those 3 weeks I was gone, fighting between life and death in a hospital bed, my son had made the single stupidest decision of his life. And the worst part was, he didn't even realize the true depth of his idiocy. "The farm you sold, my dear son," I said, wiping away a tear, this one purely from the bitter amusement of it all. "Did you truly think that I, after a lifetime tilling this land, would leave my properties without any legal protection?" Matthew swallowed hard. "Dad, I had the deeds. Everything was in order." "The notary told me." "The notary," I interrupted, cutting him off, "told you exactly what Sophia wanted you to hear. Because my dear daughter-in-law knew precisely what paper she was putting in front of you to sign." Silence. It settled between us, heavy and suffocating. I could see the information slowly sinking in, his brain connecting dots he desperately didn't want to connect. "How much did you get for the sale?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain calm, even as a hurricane of fury and disappointment churned inside me. $200,000, he murmured, avoiding my gaze. "It was enough for the honeymoon and to pay off some debts we had." I laughed again, but this time, it was a harsh, painful sound. $200,000, I repeated, savoring the words. "For a property worth." I trailed off. No, I wasn't going to reveal everything just yet. First, I needed to know the full extent of this betrayal. Who else was involved? What other schemes had they cooked up while I lay helpless? "Matthew," I said, walking towards the kitchen, "I think we need to talk. But first, you're going to tell me exactly how everything happened, from the very beginning. And don't you dare lie to me, because I already know more than you imagine." I heard him collapse into a kitchen chair, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had suddenly crushed him. For the first time, he looked like he understood that something had gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. "Dad, I didn't want to hurt you," he began, his voice choked. "Sophia said it was just a small farm you barely used." "What? That I barely used?" I repeated slowly, letting the insult hang in the air. "That was her justification," he nodded miserably. "She said we deserved this honeymoon after everything we'd been through, that you would never find out because you were sick," and he stopped abruptly, catching himself. He thought I would die on that operating table. The words landed like stones in still water. Matthew's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly glistening with tears. "No, Dad. We never thought that. Never." "But you bet on that possibility," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Because a dead father can't reclaim his properties, can he?" Matthew's sobs filled the kitchen, a tin roof under a sudden downpour. Thick tears streamed down his cheeks as he shook his head repeatedly, as if he could undo his actions with sheer willpower. "Dad, I swear on Mom's memory, we never thought you would die." "Never," he choked out, wiping his nose with the back of his hand like a child. "Sophia just said we needed that money urgently." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. The familiar aroma did little to calm the storm within me as I watched my son fall apart. For 38 years, he had been my pride, my firstborn, intelligent, and hardworking. When had he become this weak, easily manipulated man, swayed by a woman who saw only dollar signs where there should have been family? "Tell me exactly what happened," I said, keeping my voice firm but not cruel. "From the moment you arrived at the hospital until the day you signed those papers." Matthew took a shaky breath, struggling to compose himself. "On the day of your surgery, when the doctors said it was very risky, Sophia became hysterical. She cried for hours, saying that if something happened to you, we would be left with nothing." "With nothing," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Don't you two have your own jobs, your own money?" Yes, but Sophia said with the wedding expenses and everything we had invested in the house, we were drowning financially, and the honeymoon we had dreamed of was impossible with our income. I took a sip of coffee, savoring its bitterness. So, you decided my property was the solution to your financial problems. It wasn't like that, he shouted, hitting the table with his fist. Sophia investigated, went to the county recorder's office, reviewed documents, spoke with lawyers. She showed me that you had 8 properties registered in your name, and that one of them, St. Sebastian Farm, was the smallest and least productive. St. Sebastian. The name resonated in my chest like an alarm bell. Of course, they had chosen St. Sebastian, the property that seemed least important on paper, the one any person without real business knowledge would dismiss as dispensable. And you didn't investigate anything on your own? I asked, feeling disappointment slowly, chillingly, transform into something far more dangerous. I trusted my wife, he murmured, avoiding my gaze. She has a business degree, Dad. She knows these things better than I do. Sophia studied business administration, not agricultural land management, I reminded him. There's an enormous difference between managing an office and understanding the real value of a farm. He remained silent, processing my words. I could see the wheels turning in his head, beginning to grasp the magnitude of his folly. Continue, I ordered. How did you obtain the documents? How did you manage to sell without my authorization? Sophia said she had a contact at the county recorder's office, someone who knew the process for medical emergency cases. When a person is in surgery at risk of death, apparently the closest relative can make financial decisions if they have power of attorney. Power of attorney? The words left my mouth like ice chips. When did I ever give you power of attorney, Matthew? He paled even more, if that was possible. Sophia said you had signed it years ago as a precaution, that it was in a bank safe deposit box along with your will. The lie was so brazen, so perfectly constructed, that I had to admire my daughter-in-law's cunning. For 2 years she had been married to my son. For 2 years she had been the perfect wife, submissive and grateful. And all this time, she had been studying, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Did you see this document? I asked. Sophia showed it to me. It had your signature and everything. Your wife forged my signature. No. Well, I don't know. It looked real. She said it was a legal document you prepared in case something happened to you. I got up from the table and walked to the window. My land stretched to the horizon. Acres and acres of hard work and sacrifice. Every tree planted with my own hands. Every fence built with my sweat. Every animal raised with my dedication. Matthew, I said without turning around. How long did it take to find a buyer? Not long. Sophia already had one in mind. A businessman from Chicago who had shown interest in rural properties. How did Sophia know about this businessman? Silence. A silence that stretched so long I finally turned to look at him. Matthew had his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. How did Sophia know about this businessman, Matthew? She had been in contact with him since before the surgery, he finally confessed. She said it was just out of curiosity, to know the market value of the property. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Sophia hadn't just acted during my surgery. She had been planning this for months, maybe years. My illness had simply been the perfect opportunity she was waiting for. And where's my dear daughter-in-law now? I asked, a chilling calm settling over me. The calm that always precedes the storm. In the Bahamas. She left a week ago. She said she needed to rest after the stress of everything that had happened. The stress? I laughed humorlessly. Poor Sophia. It must be very stressful to rob your father-in-law while he's dying in a hospital. Dad, it wasn't robbery. It was a legal sale. We have all the papers, all the signatures, all forged signatures, I interrupted. Matthew froze. What do you mean? I mean that to legally sell St. Sebastian Farm, you not only need the power of attorney I supposedly signed, but also my direct authorization, my physical presence at the recorder's office, and verification by 3 witnesses who confirm my identity. I watched his face slowly decompose as he processed the information. But the notary said everything was in order. Which notary, Matthew? Give me the name. James Morrison. He has an office downtown. James Morrison. Of course. The same notary who had been investigated for irregularities last year. The same one who had a reputation for turning a blind eye if the price was right. My dear son, I said, returning to my seat. I think both you and Sophia were either victims of a scam or accomplices to one. The silence that followed my words was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Matthew looked at me with wide eyes, as if I had just declared the world was flat. His mouth opened and closed without making a sound, like a fish out of water struggling to breathe. Scam, he managed to articulate finally. But Dad, I saw the documents. Everything seemed legal. James explained every step of the process to us. I leaned forward, studying every gesture of my son. After 4 decades of being a father, I had learned to distinguish between genuine guilt and calculated manipulation. What I saw on Matthew's face was pure panic. The terror of a man who was beginning to understand he had been used as a pawn in a much larger game. Tell me exactly what documents you signed, I ordered, keeping my voice controlled, though inside, a hurricane of emotions raged. First, I signed a sworn statement saying you were temporarily incapacitated due to surgery. Then, I signed as your legal representative to authorize the sale. And finally, I signed the purchase and sale contract on your behalf. Each word was a deeper stab. And at no point did it occur to you to wonder why I, a man who had managed his own business for decades, would need his son to make financial decisions for him? Sophia said it was normal in medical emergency cases, that it was legal protection so hospitals wouldn't put liens on properties if medical expenses got out of control. Medical expenses? I laughed bitterly. Matthew, I've had private health insurance for 20 years. The expenses from my surgery were completely covered. I watched his face crumble even more. Every answer I gave him destroyed another of the carefully constructed lies Sophia had used to manipulate him. But she showed me hospital bills, he murmured weakly. They said there were extraordinary expenses not covered by insurance. Bills that conveniently your wife showed you, bills that weren't even in my name. He nodded miserably. They were in the family's name. Sophia said that's how the hospital dealt with this type of case. I got up again and walked to the drawer where I kept my important documents. I took out a folder and placed it on the table in front of Matthew. Here are the real hospital bills, I said, opening the folder. As you can see, all expenses were covered by my insurance. The total amount I paid out of pocket was $150 for additional medications. Matthew picked up the documents with trembling hands. His eyes scanned every line, every number, as if he were reading his own death sentence. This can't be, he whispered. The bills Sophia showed me were for $200,000. Fake bills, Matthew, created specifically to justify the urgency of selling my property. He got up abruptly, making the chair fall backward with a crash. He began pacing back and forth in the kitchen, running his hands through his hair like he used to do as a teenager when he had done something wrong. I have to call her, he said, grabbing his cell phone. I have to ask her about this. There has to be an explanation. Of course, I said sarcastically. Call your wife, who's enjoying paradise beaches with money from a fraudulent sale. I'm sure she'll have a perfectly logical explanation for all this. He dialed Sophia's number with nervous fingers and waited once, twice, 3 times. She's not answering, he murmured, trying again. How strange, I commented sarcastically. A woman who just committed fraud doesn't want to talk on the phone. How surprising. He tried 5 more times. Each call went straight to voicemail. Finally, he gave up and collapsed back into the chair, his head in his hands. Dad, he said with a choked voice, if what you're saying is true, then I committed a crime. You didn't just commit a crime, Matthew. You betrayed your own father. You sold your family's heritage to finance the whims of a woman who has been lying to you since the day you met her. Tears began flowing from his eyes again. What am I going to do? How am I going to fix this? I sat in front of him again, feeling my heart break, seeing my son destroyed. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and pain, he was still my firstborn. The baby I had carried in my arms, the boy I had taught to walk, the young man who had filled me with pride when he graduated from college. First, I said softly, you're going to tell me everything you know about this operation, every detail, every conversation, every document you signed. And when I say everything, I mean everything. He nodded desperately. I swear, Dad, I'll tell you absolutely everything. Second, you're going to help me undo this disaster because I guarantee I won't allow my property to remain in the hands of scammers. But the money has already been spent, he whispered. Sophia took almost everything for the honeymoon. Only $30,000 remained, which we used to pay the house debts. Oh, my dear son, I said, feeling a cold smile forming on my lips. If you think Sophia only took the honeymoon money, it's because you haven't understood anything about what's really happening here. His eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean that while you thought you were selling a $200,000 farm, Sophia knew perfectly well she was selling a property worth much, much more than that. How much more? I stared at him for a long moment. My son, my firstborn, sitting in my kitchen with tears in his eyes and terror in his heart. The time had come for him to know the complete truth. The truth that would change everything forever. Matthew, I said slowly. St. Sebastian Farm isn't just any property. It's not just land for cattle or crops. It's the heart of my entire empire. Beneath that apparently insignificant land, there are 3 underground water wells that supply the entire region. Additionally, it has lease contracts with 5 different companies that pay $1.2 million annually just for the right to use that water. I watched his face completely lose color. $1.2 million per year, Matthew. Every year for 8 years, and those contracts are valid until 2035. He gripped the edge of the table as if he were going to faint. That means the property you sold for $200,000 is conservatively worth $15 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds outside seemed to have stopped singing. Matthew looked at me as if I had just said the earth had stopped rotating. $15 million, he repeated mechanically. And Sophia knew? Matthew, your dear wife, knew exactly what she was doing when she chose that specific property. $15 million. Matthew repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language he couldn't comprehend. His face had adopted a grayish tone that reminded me of his mother when she had her first heart attack. Dad, this can't be true. If that property was worth so much, why didn't you ever tell me? I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of all my years on my shoulders. And what would you have needed that information for, Matthew? When your mother died, you were 22 and only thought about finishing your studies. When you got married, you were focused on building your own life. You never showed real interest in the family business. But I'm your eldest son. I had a right to know. Rights? The word came out of my mouth with more force than I intended. Rights are earned, Matthew, not automatically inherited. Your brother Peter has been working with me for 5 years, learning every aspect of the business. He does know the real value of each property. I saw how something changed in his expression, a mixture of jealousy and resentment I recognized immediately. It was the same face he used to make when they were children and Peter received attention he considered his by right of primogeniture. Peter knows about the water contracts, he asked with a tense voice. Peter knows everything he needs to know, and he also knows he would never betray his family for a woman he's barely known for 2 years. Matthew got up violently, spilling coffee on the table. This isn't fair. I didn't know Sophia was lying to me. Really, Matthew? I got up, too, feeling the patience I had maintained throughout the conversation begin to crack. Really? You're going to stand in my kitchen after selling my most valuable property behind my back and complain to me about being unfair? I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was helping you. Helping me. The laugh that came from my throat sounded more like the growl of a wounded animal. How exactly were you helping me by selling my land without my knowledge? How were you helping me by allowing your wife to forge legal documents? I didn't know they were fake. Because you didn't want to know. I finally shouted, feeling years of repressed frustration come to the surface. Because it was convenient for you to believe Sophia's lies rather than ask the hard questions. Because it was easier to take the money and look the other way than face reality. Matthew stepped back, as if he had been slapped. His eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was something different in them. It wasn't just guilt and panic anymore. Now there was a deeper despair. The terror of a man who was beginning to understand he had lost everything. Dad, he whispered, please tell me what I can do to fix this. Tell me how I can regain your trust. I turned to the window, looking at the lands I had built with my own hands. Each acre represented years of hard work, sacrifices, sleepless nights, planning my family's future. And now, through my own son's stupidity, everything was in danger. Do you know what hurts me most about all this? I asked without turning around. It's not the money, Matthew. It's not even the $15 million. It's that my own son saw me as an obstacle to be removed. I never saw you that way. I didn't turn to face him. Then explain to me why you didn't come talk to me before making this decision. Explain to me why you didn't wait for me to wake up from anesthesia to consult me about something so important. He remained silent, because we both knew the answer. He and Sophia had deliberately waited until I was at my most vulnerable moment to execute their plan. The documents were signed the day after I woke up from a life-threatening surgery. I continued, feeling each word carry pain. Really? You're going to tell me there wasn't time to wait for me? Sophia said there was a very small window of opportunity, that the buyer had other interests and if we didn't sign immediately, we would lose the sale. Another lie. I exploded. Didn't it seem convenient to you that everything had to be done so urgently? Didn't it seem strange that your wife had all the answers prepared? Matthew collapsed back into the chair, defeated. I have to call the notary. I have to cancel the sale. With what money, Matthew? Where's the $200,000? I told you Sophia took most of it for the honeymoon, but we can use what's left. We can get a loan. You don't understand, I interrupted. This isn't just about returning the money. The buyer is now legally the owner of St. Sebastian Farm, and I guarantee he knows perfectly well what he bought. The realization hit Matthew like lightning. The buyer, he was in cahoots with Sophia from the beginning? Of course. Do you really believe it was coincidence that a buyer appeared so quickly, who would be willing to pay cash without asking questions? But then this was planned long before your surgery. Finally, I said bitterly. My brilliant 38-year-old son finally understands he was manipulated from day one. He put his hands on his head, pulling his hair in desperation. What am I going to do? How am I going to live knowing I destroyed my own family? That's a question you'll have to answer for yourself, I said, feeling something harden inside my chest. But before you start feeling sorry for yourself, there's something else you need to know. He lifted his head, and the terror in his eyes told me he knew the worst was yet to come. What else? He asked with a choked voice. Sophia isn't in the Bahamas on her honeymoon. Dad, what do you mean? I mean that while you stayed here crying and feeling guilty, your dear wife flew directly to the Cayman Islands. Do you know why? He shook his head, though I think deep down he already knew. Because that's where she opened an offshore bank account 3 months ago. An account where she deposited not $200,000, but $2 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Matthew looked at me as if I had just said gravity had stopped working. $2 million, he repeated mechanically. The buyer paid $2 million directly to her. The $200,000 you received was just the tip she decided to share with you to maintain the facade. I watched his world completely crumble. Everything he believed he knew about his marriage, about his wife, about his own life evaporated in an instant. How? How do you know all this? He managed to ask. I smiled for the first time since this conversation had begun. But it wasn't a pleasant smile. Because, my dear son, while you blindly trusted Sophia's lies, I had already been investigating your wife for 6 months. Investigating Sophia? The words left Matthew's mouth as if it were the first time he had pronounced them. Why were you investigating my wife? I approached the kitchen cabinet and took out a second folder, much thicker than the first. I placed it on the table with a heavy thud that resonated throughout the room. Matthew looked at it as if it were a bomb about to explode. Because I didn't reach 68 being naive, son, I said, opening the folder slowly. And because a woman who appears out of nowhere marries my millionaire son after 6 months of dating and never shows genuine interest in getting to know the family always arouses my suspicions. Sophia didn't know I was a millionaire when we met. Oh no. I took the first sheet from the folder. Here's the report from the private investigator I hired. Gloria Martinez, former detective, specialist in matrimonial fraud cases. Want me to read what she discovered about your dear wife? Matthew's face had turned ashen. He closed his eyes as if he didn't want to hear more, but I was far from finished. Sophia Culla, 32 years old, business administration graduate from Northwestern University, as she told you. But what she didn't tell you is that she was expelled in her final semester for falsifying academic documents. Subsequently, she worked at 3 different companies between 2019 and 2021 and was fired from all 3 for embezzlement and falsification of financial reports. In 2022, she moved to our town. Do you know why? Because there was a restraining order against her in Chicago. Her ex-boyfriend, a businessman named Richard Era, accused her of stealing $800,000 from his bank account. Lies. Lies, he murmured weakly. I showed him a photocopy of the legal document. Here's the restraining order. And here's Richard's testimony detailing exactly how Sophia gained his trust, obtained access to his accounts, and disappeared with the money. Matthew took the document with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the lines repeatedly as if hoping the words would magically change. But this means everything was a lie from the beginning. Of course, it was a lie. Do you think it was coincidence that she met you at the bar of the most expensive hotel in town? The same hotel where she had been staying for 2 weeks, asking questions about the most prosperous local businessmen. I let that information settle before continuing. I could see how each revelation destroyed a little more of the image he had of his marriage, his life, himself. I continue reading, I said, turning to the next page. 3 days after meeting you at the bar, Sophia had already investigated your address, the value of your house, your annual income, and your family's wealth. How could she know all that? Because Gloria Martinez is very good at her job. And because Sophia isn't as smart as she thinks, she left a huge digital trail, internet searches about wealthy families in the region, queries at the property registry. She even hired a background investigation service to find out everything about you before the second date. Matthew got up and began walking in circles around the kitchen. His breathing had become erratic, as if he were having a panic attack. It can't be, he repeated incessantly. It can't be true. She loved me. I knew it. I felt it. What did you feel? I said with deliberate cruelty. It was a masterful performance. Sophia had studied exactly what type of woman you were looking for, what made you feel special, what emotional needs you had, and became that perfect woman. How could she know what type of woman I was looking for? I took another sheet from the folder. Because she reviewed your social media profiles for months. She studied all your ex-girlfriends, analyzed what type of posts you liked, what comments you made. She even created fake profiles to interact with you before meeting you in person. I showed him screenshots of conversations Sophia had had with him under false names. Conversations where she had probed his tastes, his dreams, his insecurities. These are conversations you had with Carmen Herrera and Lucy Rivera on different dating apps in 2021. Do you recognize them? Matthew took the sheets and read them with growing horror. These women. I thought they were admirers. I talked to them for months before meeting Sophia. They were all Sophia's son. She studied you like a scientist studies a specimen in the laboratory. When she finally met you by chance at the bar, she already knew exactly what to say, how to act, what personality to adopt to make you fall in love. He collapsed back into the chair, the sheets scattered before him like evidence of his own naivety. Why didn't you tell me any of this before the wedding? Because you're my son, and I hoped I was wrong, I admit it, feeling my own voice falter slightly. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, you had genuinely found love and my suspicions were just an overprotective father's paranoia. But you knew she was dangerous. You knew she was an opportunist and a liar. I didn't know she was a professional criminal until after the wedding. I took the final section of documents. This is what Gloria discovered after Sophia officially became my daughter-in-law. What else is there? He asked with a defeated voice. Contacts with property appraisers, consultations with lawyers specializing in estate law, searches about how to obtain legal power over relatives' properties, and most revealing of all, a secret email account where she coordinated with the supposed buyer of the farm. Matthew lifted his head sharply. You have access to her emails? Gloria has her methods, and Sophia made the mistake of using the same password for multiple accounts. I showed him printouts of emails between Sophia and a man named Daniel Rodriguez. Emails that dated back 3 months before my surgery. Here you can see how they planned the entire operation. Sophia promised him access to St. Sebastian Farm in exchange for $2 million. Daniel knew perfectly the real value of the property because Sophia had provided him with the legal copies of all my lease contracts. How did she get copies of your contracts? She searched my home office one night when she came to dinner. While you and I talked in the living room, she pretended to go to the bathroom and photographed all the important documents. Matthew put his head in his hands. I'm an idiot. A complete idiot. Yes, I said without mercy. You are. But now the question is, what are you going to do about it? He lifted his head, and for the first time since he had arrived, I saw something resembling determination in his eyes. I'm going to help you recover the farm. I'm going to do everything in my power to undo the damage I caused, even if it means testifying against my own wife. She's not your wife, I said with a firm voice. My wife never existed. It was just an act. I smiled for the first time with something resembling approval. Good, because that's exactly what we'll need to do. What do you need me to do? Matthew asked. And for the first time since he had arrived, his voice sounded like that of the man I had raised. Firm, determined, without a trace of the weakness that had characterized him throughout our conversation. I got up and walked to the kitchen phone. First, we're going to call Gloria. She's not only my private investigator, she's also my attorney, and she has very good news to share with you. I dialed the number from memory. Gloria answered on the second ring as if she had been expecting my call. Robert, how did it go with your son? Exactly as you predicted. He's here with me, completely destroyed, but finally willing to cooperate. Can you come? It's time to put the plan into action. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Did you tell him about the trap we set? Not yet. I wanted to wait for you to arrive to explain everything together. Perfect. I'm leaving now. I hung up and turned to Matthew, who was looking at me with total confusion. What trap? He asked. The trap we prepared for Sophia and her accomplice, I said, returning to my seat. Did you really think that I, after 40 years managing businesses, would leave my most valuable properties without legal protection? I don't understand. Of course, you don't understand, because you've been seeing this situation from a victim's perspective, but I was never the victim in this story, Matthew. I was always the hunter. I watched him process my words. How his expression slowly changed from confusion to something resembling admiration. You're telling me you knew what was going to happen? I didn't know exactly when they would attack, but I knew they would. Gloria and I have been preparing this trap for months. What kind of trap? I smiled, feeling for the first time in weeks that I had complete control of the situation. The kind of trap that turns hunters into prey. Before he could respond, we heard the sound of a car arriving at the driveway. Through the window, I saw Gloria's gray Honda parking next to Matthew's car. There she is, I said, getting up to receive her. Now you're going to hear exactly how we're going to destroy your ex-wife and recover not only my farm, but much more. Gloria entered through the back door without knocking, as she always did. She was a 55-year-old woman, salt and pepper hair cut into a professional bob, with penetrating eyes that missed no detail. She had been a police detective for 20 years before opening her own investigation firm. Matthew greeted her with a dry nod. You look terrible. I feel worse, he admitted. Good. That means you finally understand the gravity of what you did. Gloria placed her briefcase on the table and opened it. Did your father explain that we've been investigating Sophia since before the wedding? Yes, he showed me the dossier. That was just the basic dossier, she said, taking out a much thicker folder. This is the complete dossier of Operation Lost Farm. Operation Lost Farm? Matthew looked at me incredulously. You gave it a name? When you plan a counterintelligence operation for 6 months, yes, you give it a name, Gloria replied dryly. And this operation was a resounding success. She sat in front of us and opened the folder. First, you need to understand that the sale of St. Sebastian Farm was never legal. That Dad already explained to me. No, he didn't explain it completely. It wasn't legal, not only because they forged documents, but because St. Sebastian Farm technically doesn't exist. Matthew blinked several times. What do you mean it doesn't exist? I mean that 6 months ago, when we began to suspect Sophia would try something like this, your father legally divided the property into 3 different parcels. St. Sebastian Farm, which appears in public records, is only one of those parcels, the least valuable. I turned to my son, enjoying his expression of total shock. The water wells and million-dollar contracts are in the other 2 parcels, which are registered under different corporate names. Corporate names? Companies I created specifically to protect the most valuable assets, I explained. Sophia effectively sold 30 acres of pasture with no significant commercial value. Gloria continued the explanation. The supposed buyer, Daniel Rodriguez, believed he was purchasing access to the water wells, but legally he only bought cattle land. So Sophia didn't get the millions? Oh yes, she got them, Gloria said with a fierce smile. Daniel paid her $2 million for a property that in reality is worth the $200,000 you believed. It's the scammer being scammed. But the money is still lost. Not exactly. Gloria took out another document. You see, when a transaction is based on fraud and document falsification, all related assets can be frozen and recovered. What do you mean? I mean that 3 days ago, by court order, we froze Sophia's offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The $2 million is secure under legal custody until the case is resolved. Matthew was speechless, just looking back and forth between me and Gloria, as if we were aliens speaking an incomprehensible language. There's more, Gloria continued. Beyond that, the FBI has opened a federal investigation for money laundering. When they reviewed her bank accounts for our case, they found evidence of other illegal operations. Federal investigation? Your wife isn't just a small-time scammer, Matthew, I said. She unknowingly associated with a high-level criminal who's been in the FBI's crosshairs for 2 years. Daniel used the $2 million he paid Sophia to launder drug cartel money, Gloria added. Now both he and she are being investigated for a dozen federal crimes. Is Sophia arrested? Not yet. But not because we don't know where she is. Gloria smiled. We know exactly where your dear ex-wife is. Where? in a luxury suite in Georgetown, Cayman Islands, unaware that all her movements are being monitored by international federal agents. Matthew got up abruptly. Federal agents? How are federal agents involved in this? Because Daniel Rodriguez is more than just a simple scammer, I explained. He's the money launderer for one of the biggest Colombian drug cartels, and Sophia unknowingly became his accomplice. When Daniel used the money from the sale for his laundering operations, he automatically made Sophia part of an international criminal conspiracy. Gloria added, "This is surreal," Matthew murmured, sitting back down. "You're telling me my wife didn't just deceive me, but now she's involved with drug traffickers?" "Ex-wife," I corrected firmly. "And yes, that's exactly what we're telling you." Gloria closed one folder and opened another. "But here comes the part that will really interest you, Matthew. The part where you can help bring justice." "What do you need me to do?" "Sophia is going to try to contact you in the next 48 hours, Gloria said. "Our sources tell us she's getting nervous because she hasn't been able to access her bank account." "How do you know this?" "Because we've been intercepting her communications for a week. Every call, every message, every internet access attempt is being monitored by federal agents. When she calls you," I continued, "she's going to try to convince you that everything was a misunderstanding. She'll promise she can return the money, that she can resolve everything." "And what should I do?" "Play her game," Gloria replied. "Make her believe you still trust her. Get her to confess everything over the phone." "A recorded confession," I confirmed. "A recorded confession that will seal her fate and Daniel Rodriguez's forever." Matthew looked at us for a long moment. "And if I do this, can we really recover the farm?" "Son," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "When we finish with this operation, we'll not only recover the farm, we'll recover the millions, plus punitive damages, plus the properties Daniel Rodriguez will lose when he's arrested." "How much money are we talking about?" Gloria smiled. "Conservatively, about $12 million. $12 million? Matthew repeated the words like a magic prayer. "How is it possible to recover so much money?" Gloria opened a new section of documents. "When someone commits fraud using your properties as a base for criminal operations, the law allows you to claim not only the original value, but also all the benefits they obtained illegally through RICO statutes." Additionally, I added, "Daniel Rodriguez has considerable assets that will be confiscated when he's arrested. Miami penthouse valued at $3 million, yacht worth $2 million, and bank accounts in 3 different countries. And since Sophia was his direct accomplice in the original fraud that made everything else possible legally, we have a right to a portion of those assets under civil forfeiture laws," Gloria explained. Matthew ran his hands through his hair. "This is like a movie. I can't believe all this is happening." "Well, believe it," I said firmly. "And prepare yourself because in the next few hours, your life is going to change completely." As if summoned by my words, Matthew's cell phone began to ring. All 3 of us froze. Gloria was the first to react. "Who is it?" she asked, approaching to see the screen. Matthew looked at the phone and paled. "It's Sophia." "Perfect," Gloria murmured, taking a small device from her briefcase. "It's earlier than we expected, but we're prepared." "What is that?" Matthew asked, pointing to the device. "A professional-grade call recorder, completely legal when one party consents to the recording." Gloria connected the device to the phone. "Are you ready for this?" I don't know what to say. "Follow my lead," I said, sitting next to him. "Act like the hurt husband, more confused than angry. Let her talk. Let her explain herself. The more she says, the better for us." The phone kept ringing. Matthew looked at me with panic in his eyes. "I can't. What if I mess everything up?" "You won't mess anything up," I assured him. "Just remember, she needs you more than you need her now. She's desperate." Gloria nodded. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." With trembling hands, Matthew answered the call and activated speakerphone. "Matthew, honey, you finally answered." Sophia's voice sounded high-pitched nervous. "I've been trying to call you for hours." "Hello, Sophia," Matthew replied, his voice noticeably tense. "How's your honeymoon?" There was a pause. "Matthew, I need to talk to you about something important." "Are you alone?" Gloria signaled me. I whispered to Matthew, "Say yes." "Yes, I'm alone." "What happened?" "You sound worried." "It's about the farm sale. There's been a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The money, Matthew. I can't access the money." I exchanged glances with Gloria. Exactly as we had predicted. "What do you mean you can't access the money?" Matthew asked, following our script. "The bank account is frozen. The bank says there's an investigation ongoing, but they won't explain what it's about." "What bank account?" Matthew asked the perfect question. Another pause. Longer this time. "Matthew, there's something I didn't tell you about the sale money." "What didn't you tell me?" "The buyer. He wanted to make the payment differently for tax reasons, understand? He asked me to open a special account to receive the money." Gloria smiled and raised her thumb. Sophia was digging her own grave. "A special account where?" Matthew pressed. "In the Cayman Islands, but it's completely legal, honey. It's just a way to handle large transactions for tax purposes." "Sophia, how much money is in that account?" Silence. A silence so long I thought the call had dropped. "Sophia, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here." "Matthew, I need you to trust me. There's more money than I originally told you." "How much more?" The buyer was so eager to close the deal that he offered more money. "Much more?" "How much more, Sophia?" Matthew raised his voice, and it wasn't acting. Real anger was coming to the surface. $2 million, Matthew, but I can explain everything. $2 million? Matthew stood up, walking in circles. You're telling me you got $2 million and didn't tell me anything? I was going to tell you when I got back. I wanted to surprise you. I thought we could use that money to buy a bigger house, to have the future we always wanted. Gloria wrote quickly on paper. Ask why the account is frozen. Sophia, if everything is legal like you say, why is the account frozen? I don't know, honey. That's why I'm calling you. I need you to come here to help me resolve this. Go where? To the Cayman Islands. We can resolve this together. Gloria shook her head vigorously and wrote, No, I can't go right now, Sophia. Dad came back from the hospital and needs care. Your father is back already? How is he? The concern in her voice sounded completely fake. Gloria made a disgusted gesture. He's fine, but very weak. The doctors say he'll need weeks of recovery. Of course, of course. Does he already know about the sale? Gloria wrote quickly, say yes and watch her reaction. Yes, I told him. He didn't like much that we made the decision without consulting him. What did he say exactly? He was upset. He said St. Sebastian Farm was more important than we thought. More important, how? He didn't give me details. He just said he had special plans for that property. There was another long silence. I could imagine Sophia processing this information, wondering how much we really knew. Matthew, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What? Did your father suspect something about us? About the sale? Gloria and I exchanged glances. This was the question we'd been waiting for. Why do you ask that? Because there's something strange happening here. The bank is asking these strange questions. Questions about the money's origin, about my relationship with you, about your family. What kind of questions? I think someone reported the transaction as suspicious. Gloria wrote, ask her who she thinks reported it. Who do you think could have done that? Only one person occurs to me who has so much knowledge about our affairs and so much power to cause problems. Your father, Matthew. I think your father knew what we were going to do and prepared some kind of trap. Matthew looked at me with genuine admiration. You think my father is capable of something like that? Your father is smarter than any of us thought, and I think we underestimated how much he knows about business and law. Gloria raised her thumb again. Sophia was confessing her guilt and acknowledging it had been a premeditated operation. Sophia, are you telling me my father knew in advance what you were going to do? No. Well, yes, but not the way it sounds. I just wanted to be prepared in case an opportunity arose. An opportunity for what? To secure our future, Matthew. So we wouldn't have to depend on your father forever. Depend on my father? I have my own job, my own money. But it's never going to be enough for the kind of life we deserve. Your father has millions, Matthew. Millions that will be yours someday anyway. Gloria wrote, get her to confess the forgery. Sophia, I need you to tell me the truth about something. The documents I signed, were they all real? Pause. Why do you ask that? Because my father says he never signed a power of attorney. Your father is confused, honey. The effects of anesthesia can last weeks. Are you sure that document was real? Matthew, why are you doubting me now? Your father is putting ideas in your head. Gloria smiled and wrote, perfect. She's admitting it's a forgery without saying it directly. It's not that I doubt you, Sophia, Matthew continued, following Gloria's written instructions, but my father wants to see the original document. He says he needs to verify its authenticity for his own legal records. Why would he want to verify something he signed himself? Because he says he doesn't remember signing it. And you know my father, he's very meticulous with his documents. There was a silence so long I thought Sophia had hung up. Finally, her voice returned, but it sounded different, more cautious, more calculating. Matthew, I think your father is pretending not to remember to cause us problems. Why would he do that? Because he never liked me. From the day we met, he always thought I wasn't good enough for you. Gloria wrote, ask her where the original document is. Where's the original document? We could show it to him and resolve this whole misunderstanding. Matthew said, the document is in a safe place. What safe place? In a bank safe deposit box along with other important documents of your father's. Gloria and I exchanged incredulous glances. Sophia was inventing lies in real time, digging her grave deeper with each word. Which bank? Matthew pressed. First National downtown. Your father gave me access to his safe deposit box before the surgery. My father gave you access to his safe deposit box? Matthew's voice went up an octave. When was this? It was the day before the operation. He said that in case of emergency, someone in the family should have access to his important documents. Gloria wrote furiously, that safe deposit box doesn't exist. Your father never had one. Sophia, are you sure it was First National downtown, because my father always used Wells Fargo? Pause. Yes, you're right. I got confused. It's Wells Fargo. And you have the keys? Yes, I have a copy of the keys. Gloria shook her head and wrote, lie after lie. Keep pressing. Could you go to the bank tomorrow and bring the documents so we could show it to my father and resolve everything? Matthew, I can't come back now. I have to resolve this problem with the bank account first. What problem exactly? If everything is legal, it should be easy to resolve. It's complicated, honey. The bank is asking questions about Daniel, the buyer. What kind of questions about Daniel? Questions about his financial background, about his other transactions. It seems he's being investigated for something. Gloria smiled and raised both thumbs. Sophia had just admitted she knew Daniel had legal problems. Investigated for what? Matthew asked. I'm not sure. Something about irregularities in his business dealings. Sophia, did you know about these irregularities when you made the deal with him? Of course not. How would I know? Gloria wrote, ask her how she met him. How did you meet Daniel exactly? I already told you before. I had contacts in the real estate sector. But how did you specifically meet him? Through a mutual friend. What friend? Someone I met at my previous job. Which job? I thought you worked in administration at a small company. Another long pause. Yes, that's correct. So, how did that job connect you with someone who knows millionaire farm buyers? Matthew, why are you interrogating me like I'm a criminal? I'm not interrogating you. I'm just trying to understand how we got to this situation. The situation is simple. I made a good deal. The money is temporarily blocked for bureaucratic reasons, and your father is trying to cause problems because he doesn't like that we made independent decisions. Gloria wrote, get her to admit how much she knew about Daniel. Really, Sophia, I need you to be completely honest with me. How long have you known Daniel? Why is that important? Because if this deal becomes a legal issue, I need to know all the details. I've known him for a few months, maybe 4 or 5. 4 or 5 months. But didn't you say you contacted him when Dad got sick? Yes. Well, I had spoken with him before casually about the property market in general. Did you talk specifically about my father's properties? Maybe I mentioned that your family had land in the region. Gloria wrote, perfect admission of premeditation. And he showed specific interest in Dad's land? He showed interest in rural properties in general. Sophia, did you specifically tell him about St. Sebastian Farm? I might have mentioned it. When did you mention it? I don't remember exactly when. Was it before or after Dad was scheduled for surgery? Total silence. A silence that stretched so long that Matthew looked at the phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Sophia, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. Matthew, I don't see why these details are important now. They're important because I need to understand if this was planned or if it was a spontaneous decision. It was an opportunity that arose during a family crisis. Nothing more. Gloria wrote, ask her about the $2 million versus the $200,000. Sophia, there's something I don't understand about the money. You told me the property was sold for $200,000, but now you say there's $2 million in the account. I already explained that the buyer offered more money than originally agreed. When did he offer more money? Before or after signing? After when he saw the property and realized its true value. Its true value? What specific value did he see that we hadn't seen? Matthew, why are you pressing me so hard? You should be happy we got more money than expected. I'm trying to understand, because my father says that property is worth much more than $2 million. Much more? What do you mean? He says that farm has special contracts that make it worth more than $15 million. The silence that followed was deafening. I could imagine Sophia on the other side of the line, her mind working furiously trying to decide what to say. That's impossible, she finally said. Your father is exaggerating to scare you. Are you sure? Because he seems very confident about his numbers. Matthew, your father is trying to manipulate you to turn you against me. Or maybe you manipulated me to sell something worth much more than I thought. I would never do that. Then how do you explain that Daniel would be willing to pay $2 million for something apparently worth only $200,000? He must have seen potential we didn't see. Or maybe he knew exactly what he was buying because you gave him information I didn't have. Matthew, you're being paranoid. Am I paranoid, or am I finally starting to see the truth? Sophia's voice changed completely. It became cold, calculating. The mask had finally fallen. You know what, Matthew? I think your father has completely brainwashed you. You're acting exactly like he wanted. Like he wanted? Yes. He knew this was going to happen. He knew that when you found out about the complete amount, you would be suspicious. He planned everything to turn you against me. Gloria wrote, keep pressing. She's about to confess everything. Sophia, are you telling me my father knew in advance what you were going to do? Your father is craftier than any of us thought. What do you mean by any of us? Who else is involved in this? Pause. No one else. Just us. Us includes Daniel. Daniel is just the buyer. A buyer who casually had $2 million in cash available for a purchase that was decided in 3 days? Serious investors always have capital available. Sophia, Matthew said, his voice now completely firm. I think it's time you told me the complete truth. The complete truth? Sophia's voice had become venomous. All trace of the sweet, worried wife had disappeared. What is the complete truth, Matthew? All right, I'll give you the complete truth. Gloria and I leaned forward. After months of investigation and planning, we were finally going to hear a complete confession. The truth is, your father was right from the beginning. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew the real value of that farm since before I married you. Matthew froze as if he had received an electric shock. Since before we got married? Since before I met you, dear husband. Do you really think it was coincidence that I showed up at that specific bar? That specific night, dressed exactly the type you like? Matthew, I spent 3 months studying you before our first date. I knew you went to that bar every Friday after work. I knew you had just broken up with your ex-girlfriend. I knew you had a tendency to fall in love quickly with women who seemed vulnerable and independent at the same time. Gloria touched my arm and whispered, this is better than we expected. Everything was a lie? Matthew asked with a choked voice. Not everything. I enjoyed some moments with you. You're a good man, Matthew. Too good, too trusting, too easy to manipulate. And the marriage? The marriage was necessary to have legal access to your family's documents. A girlfriend can ask many curious questions, but a wife has legal rights. Matthew looked at me with tears in his eyes. I nodded silently, giving him strength to continue. How long were you planning to steal the farm? It wasn't stealing. It was smart business. And I'd been planning it since the day I married you. Your father's surgery just accelerated the timeline. How did you know about the water contracts? Because unlike you, I thoroughly investigated your family's wealth before joining it. I hired my own private investigator, reviewed public records, talked to farm employees. Gloria wrote, ask her about Daniel. And Daniel, how long have you really known him? Daniel and I have been partners for 2 years. He specializes in identifying undervalued rural properties with development potential. Partners in what? In various businesses. Your father's farm was just one of many projects. Scam projects? Smart asset acquisition projects. It's not our fault that owners don't understand the real value of what they possess. Matthew got up and started pacing in circles. Sophia, do you realize you just confessed to multiple federal crimes? Crimes? What crimes? Everything we did was legal. You forged my father's signature. Prove it. The 2 words were pronounced with a coldness that chilled my blood. This wasn't the shy Sophia I had known. This was an experienced criminal. Prove it, because there's no way to prove that signature wasn't authorized by your father in a moment of lucidity before surgery. Gloria smiled fiercely and wrote, she's admitting the forgery. Sophia, are you admitting you forged documents? I'm not admitting anything that can be used against me, but I'll tell you something you can use. Your father will never recover that farm. Why are you so sure? Because Daniel already sold it to an offshore company in Panama, and that company has already begun commercial exploitation of the water wells. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Gloria looked at me with concern, but I signaled to keep recording. He sold it for how much? Matthew asked. For $12 million. My share is $4 million. Daniel keeps 8. Your share? So, you two plan to cheat not only my father, but also the company that originally bought it. The company that originally bought it was Daniel's shell company. The entire process was designed to transfer the property as quickly as possible. Sophia, do you realize you're confessing a massive criminal conspiracy to me? I'm explaining to you how the real world works, Matthew. Your family had that farm for years without maximizing its potential. We're doing that. By stealing it, by acquiring it through legal means, and then optimizing its use. Gloria wrote, ask her about the blocked money. If everything was as legal as you say, why is the money blocked in your account? Because your dear father isn't as stupid as we thought. Apparently, there was some kind of legal protection on those properties that we didn't detect. What kind of protection? I'm not sure, but it seems the division of the property we sold wasn't as simple as we thought. Apparently, your father had legally divided St. Sebastian Farm into several different parcels before the sale. And what does that mean? Matthew looked at me. It means that technically Daniel only bought part of what he thought he was buying. And the water wells are in the other parcels, the parcels that continue to be your father's property. Matthew looked at me with absolute admiration. So, Dad, you outsmarted them. Your father outsmarted everyone from the beginning, I said, taking the phone. Hello, Sophia. This is Robert. The silence that followed was absolute. I could imagine the panic on Sophia's face as she realized she had been confessing everything in front of the person she had tried to deceive. Robert, she finally said, her voice a whisper. Yes, dear daughter-in-law, I've been listening to your very enlightening confession. You can't use anything I said. It was a private conversation. Actually, I can, because Matthew consented to recording the call, and because Gloria, my attorney, was present as a witness. Gloria Martinez, also a private detective, licensed and specialist in fraud cases. Hello, Sophia. We'll be very soon in person. This isn't legal. It's completely legal, Gloria intervened. And your confession just sealed your fate and Daniel Rodriguez's. You can't prove anything. Dear, I said with a smile in my voice, we don't need to prove anything. You just proved everything for us. The contracts Daniel signed are null because they were based on falsified documents. The property he bought doesn't include water rights, and the money he paid you is already under federal custody. Federal. Daniel Rodriguez is being investigated by the FBI for money laundering. The $4 million you mentioned is being traced as part of that investigation. You can't do this. We already did, Sophia. While you were enjoying your fake honeymoon, we've been working with federal authorities to dismantle your entire operation. Matthew. Her voice became pleading. You can testify that I didn't know Daniel had legal problems. No, Matthew replied firmly. I won't lie for you ever again. Do you know what's most ironic about all this? I asked. What? That if you had come to me honestly, if you had asked me for help for your future with Matthew, I probably would have helped. We could have found legitimate ways to secure your prosperity. But instead, you chose the path of betrayal, and now you'll pay the consequences. This isn't over. Sophia said, her voice full of venom. You're right, I agreed. It's not over because now comes the part where the authorities arrest you. What do you mean? I mean that while we were having this conversation, federal agents were waiting for the order to arrest you. An order they just received. You're lying. Gloria, I said, can you confirm to Sophia that I'm not lying? Gloria smiled. Sophia, look out your hotel window. There was silence, then footsteps, then a muffled exclamation. Welcome to justice, dear, I said softly. I hope you enjoyed your honeymoon because it's going to be the last thing you enjoy for a long time. The call ended. Matthew looked at me with a mixture of admiration, shock, and gratitude. Dad, he finally said. You're incredible. I didn't answer, just hugged him tightly. I'm just a father protecting his family.